This week, we meet a man who grew up in a broken household but overcame it. Let's learn more about his ups and downs after I hit this music. Joining me this week is author of Wrestling with Demons and former WCW wrestler Mark Smith. Mark, thank you for coming on today.
Brother, it is such a pleasure. Thank you. And to all the listeners, I just want to say thank you and that today you're giving us a great gift. In the scheme of things, in the scheme of life rather, time is the one thing that we're always so uncertain about.
Yep.
So when you're giving us your time, you're really blessing us. It's a sign of love. It's a sign of caring. I want you to know that we appreciate that, and I really appreciate you, Tim, and everyone listening.
Thank you, Mark. And I'm really excited to hear your story because you have a great story of resilience, which pretty much a lot of people need to hear these days. And I'm excited to hear about it. I want to start with your growing up, your household. How was growing up as a child?
Growing up as a child, it was kind of wild and woolly, to be honest with you. My father had been beaten with chains, and of course, I'm 57. So when you talk about my dad, people did not talk about abuse or anything back in those days. So for him, it was something that he had to bear and deal with. Therefore, it was unprocessed. So the things would come out and, we would feel them. But growing up, when there's a sign of abuse, and I have to say my mother is wonderful, and I'm going to probably talk to her this afternoon. But abuse causes a kid to get lost. And what I mean by that is, where's the security? You ask at times, where's the love? You at times wonder, why do I hate? What's my purpose? Who cares? It brings up so many questions that growing up in that kind of atmosphere or environment, the uncertainties are so overwhelming that you literally feel like a leaf being tossed in the wind. That's what that kind of childhood, that's how it makes you feel.
Growing up with your dad, when he would hit you, was it because you were acting up? Would there be a time he would just hit you for no reason?
Yeah, we would break out into sweats. When he would come home from the gas station, I would break out in a sweat. I'd automatically go into a depression slash fear mode because having those unprocessed feelings like he had, anything could pull that anger out because having unprocessed trauma, that means you've also got hidden anger. And I compare it to a champagne bottle where you put all the stuff down into the champagne bottle and the pressure is so hard or so much, and then you cork it. And when the pressure just gets so high, that cork's going to explode.
Did the abuse continue all through high school? Did it stop at some point? Because obviously you must have you played sports like baseball in order to get to that training camp.
Well, I actually played like American Legion ball, different things, county type teams, that kind of thing. I broke a few strikeout records. I believe my best season, I was like either 7-2 or 9-2, had an ERA of around two, and I'd struck out 167 batters, and I broke a national record. So, yeah, I don't even remember my dad seeing me play ball.
Okay.
And in wrestling, he only saw me wrestle one match.
Wow.
My mom, on the other hand, would be there anytime she could be. And for that, I have a lot of gratitude.
Yeah. I don't want to make excuses for your dad at all. I'm not trying to
No,
do that here. But
please. I
but
love
what I-
him. It's all good.
but what I do want to ask, how was your dad's life raising you and his family? Was he just constantly under stress from work? What was he going through?
He would go through bouts of depression.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know. I cannot remember enough looking into the childhood years, back into the childhood years rather, if there were signs of being bipolar. I think as quick as he could go up and down, there were probably things like that. And I mean, see, Tim, the way I look at it, even with my dad, you may have people that you like or dislike, you love or you don't love them at all. The thing is with every relationship, you can appreciate something. Either that person is going to show you how to be or how not to be. Now, he was my father. I love him. Could could I have killed him? Yes, at times. I was ready to. But I did love him, and I think a sign of my love for him was when he passed away, we actually, uh he made his mind up on this little plot that machinery really couldn't get into. So my brother and I went and we dug his grave and we
Oh,
buried him with a shovel. That haunted me for a long time, but then I realized it was kind of an epiphany. I felt guilty for burying him, but then it hit me. It finally hit me that that was the last true act of love I could do for him to make sure that he was taken care of. So that, I'm at peace with everything. I
yeah.
mean, I can talk about it. There are some of the things that somebody would say, "My lord, how can you laugh about that?" Well, I'm at peace. You know, I myself, I feel like I've been forgiven. I've also learned how to forgive myself. And so I don't have a grudge against anybody.
So after you experienced the abuse from your father, you were very close. You were invited to spring training camp for the Atlanta Braves. What happened?
Yeah, my stepdad. Well, my stepdad, that my mom and dad finally got divorced, and frankly, it was best.
Yeah.
And she had married a fine man. I will tell you till today, he is a was a fine man. But his wife, first wife, had died of cancer. He began taking her pain pills, and by the time him and my mom got married, we didn't know it, but he was taking like 25, 30 Percodan and Percocet a day. Well, we're watching a Braves game one night, and he says, "Mark, I've seen you throw. You need to go up there." And the next day, we went outside, and I threw in one throw. I broke his finger. Didn't mean to do that. One season, I actually broke my catcher's finger like 7 times.
Wow.
Okay, and so he says, "You're definitely going to that tryout." So I go. The old second baseman for the Atlanta Braves, Rod Gilbreth, tried me out. In fact, I talked to Rod about 2 years ago. I got in touch with him. I wanted to ask him a few questions. And he asked me, he says, "Mark, what all did you do at the tryout?" And I told him. He said, "You know what? I got your file in my attic. Still to today, my file is in his attic." He said, "You got your invite to spring training, didn't you?" I said, "Yes, sir, I did." He said, "Did you go?" I said, "No, sir, I couldn't." He said, "Why?" And this gets into what you were asking. My stepdad, on an occasion, he put down a lot of wine, several bottles mixed with all those pain pills. And I said something. I walked in and he was just bombed out of his gourd. Okay. And I said, "You're really too good for this. You don't have to live like a bum." And boy, when I said that, he flew up and he started spitting in my face, going after me. And I just picked him up and I put him down. I felt something in my right hand that didn't feel right. About 2 weeks later, I'm going to work and I'm driving in a Chevy Chevette, those big, sports cars, the Chevettes.
Yep.
You remember them, right? Well, a kid was driving a Ford LTD, drinking a Coca-Cola from McDonald's, ran a stop sign, broadsided me, driver's side door, and my right hand goes to the instrument panel and it starts bleeding and all. And finally, my mom, says, "What? You got to go to the doctor. We got to go to the doctor." Instead, it had torn so many nerves in this area of my hand that I would not be able to snap a curveball. And he was right. I lost my
Yeah.
curveball.
Oh man.
And a man cannot live in the major leagues with just a fastball.
Yeah.
If you remember, Nolan Ryan could throw the ball 100 miles an hour, but Nolan Ryan had one of the best sliders and curveballs in professional baseball. And I knew I was done. Now, go if you think about it, as a kid in the abuse, I felt lost. I did not really feel like I had a world of my own. Now, guess what? I'm lost. I lost baseball,
Yep.
and I have a world of my own. Things do repeat itself.
You couldn't play baseball anymore. How'd you find wrestling? Because you did wrestle when you were younger, so how'd you find
Oh,
that
yeah, a
professional?
lot younger.
Yeah.
Uh, what happened was I grew up in a town in Georgia, and just so happened a boy named Mark Scarpa. I went to school with him. I knew Mark. He was a little bit of a troublemaker. He was kind of wild, but we were good friends. And Mark Scarpa and Mark Smith were always alphabetized together, in class.
Yep.
So we always got to talking. Well, he was the adopted son of Chief Jay Strongbow in the WWF.
Yep.
Well, Mark comes by the gas station one day, and I'm there, and I'm picking up, I don't know, or one of those car top carriers by myself, or pulling a 6 by 12 tandem trailer across the parking lot. He says, "My gosh, you're big." He says, "Mark, what's going on with you?" I said, "Man, I'm just working. I don't have no plans. I don't know what to do." And I noticed he's really jacked himself.
Yeah.
I said, "What have you been doing?" He said, "Well, I actually been up in Portland." I said, "Who, Don Owens?" He said, "Yeah, I've been working for Don. He pays well." I said, "Wow." And Don Owens is a wrestling promoter. So start talking. He says, "Tonight, let me come by and pick you up. I want to take you somewhere." So I go, "Okay." So Mark comes and gets me. We drive to the edge of these woods. He says, "Come on and come into the woods." I said, "Mark, I'm not going to repeat the movie Deliverance, okay? I'm not going into the woods." And he says, "Look, just shut up and come on." And we walk about 9 feet into the woods, and there's a wrestling ring just set up. I go, "My God, Mark, what are we doing here? Gonna have squirrel mania? What's going on?" And he says, "No." I said, "Get in the ring." He said, "Slam me." Boom, boom. He slams me. Boom, boom. We work for a little while. He says, "You need to get in this business." Well, Mark goes back up to work for Don Owens, and then works over in WWF at the time. During that time, a fellow in our hometown, come to find out, he's an old wrestling manager. One of my kinfolk takes me over to meet him. His name's Bill Arnold. And I walk in, and he's sitting back in his chair like this with a hat on, wearing black. "Mark Smith, so what are you doing today?" Skinny as a rail. I mean, he looked like he came off The Sopranos, and he was sitting there, I guess, for somebody to come and ask him for a favor. Okay. Well, anyhow, I tell him, he says, "So you want to try it?" And had this long draw. I say, "Yes, sir." He says, "Hold on a minute." So he raises back up in his chair, calls a guy, "Go to the city." It was like a park, and it was a building where there were basketball goals and things like that. He says, "Go to City Park, and there'll be a fella named Art Pritz to meet you." "Yes, sir." So I show up. Art Pritz is there. "All right, Mark, let's see what you got." I said, "Okay, what are we going to do?" He says, "We're going to take bumps and everything. You see that 1 inch mat over there?" I go, "Yes, sir." He says, "Bring it over here and put it on this concrete floor." For months, I'm talking body slams, backdrops. Everything I took was on a concrete floor with a 1 inch mat.
Oh, wow.
That is the way wrestling used to be. They wanted to see if you were tough enough, and they wanted to make it so tough that they would be surprised if you came the second day. Well, I'm gonna tell you what, brother, I walked away, and I could have played Jingle Bells because everything in me was rattling. I mean, it was hurting. I wake up the next morning, and I look like Gumby, but I just can't move. But I go back, go back, go back.
How did you make it in the NWA? It's NWA, right? National Wrestling
Yeah,
Alliance?
NWA to begin with, yes.
Yes.
What happened was I got a phone call. Somebody said, "Do you wanna work for Dusty Rhodes?" Because he was doing the booking in Atlanta. I go, "Okay, yeah, sure." They say, "Well, we need you for Saturday morning TV." I said, "Okay." But, it was merely by phone call. And then going from that to WCW, what happened was that Jody Hamilton had become a booker for WCW. Ted Turner had just bought it, the NWA. So Jody Hamilton calls me. He says, and I'm living close to Atlanta, Georgia, and there's a Cleveland, Georgia, where a lot of small time wrestling goes on. They draw really well. Jody and he Jody would run Cleveland. So Jody calls me. He says, "Mark," he said, "I need you. Can you work tonight?" I say, "Yes, sir." He says, "I need you to be in Cleveland." I said, "Okay. Well, what time do you want me there?" He said, "As soon as you can get here." I said, "Well, Miss Jody, it only takes me about 2 hours." He says, "Mark, you don't understand." I said, No, sir, I don't. Please tell me." He said, "I need you to come to the 12th floor of CNN Center, pick up your airplane tickets, go to the airport, and get on that flight to Cleveland, Ohio. I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. We're do WCW is here tonight, and this is where you're gonna be working."
I did see on YouTube that you were tag teamed, and it was you and I think it was Glacier that,
Ray Lloyd. Yeah.
I know him as Glacier from WCW,
Mhm.
but you fought against Sid Vicious
I
and
fought
somebody
against Sid
else.
a lot. Kenny
Yeah.
Spivey. They were the
Okay.
Skyscrapers, and they were managed by Teddy
Yes.
Long.
Okay. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
Sid is the kind of person that, for me anyway, if he knows you're going out there and you're gonna do a great job for him, do your best. I mean, really work hard. And several of the guys would ask you, I think I got something in mind. Do you think you could do this? And I've always had the ability to like look at my body as a stick figure and see how cuffing a rope in my elbow, how I can cause myself to move and twist different directions. So a lot of times I could say, "Yeah, I can do it. Are you sure?" "Yeah, this is what I'm gonna do." Boom, boom. And I could just tell them within seconds how I was gonna do it. Brian Pillman, we worked a lot together, and he loved that. He drop kicked me in the, shoulder one time, and I was sitting on the top rope, and I worked my way down to the floor where I landed on my feet and rolled and hit the railing. Perfect landing.
Did you,
Uh,
ever get to wrestle with Sting, Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan,
Sting,
those
yeah,
people?
well, not Hogan. He
Okay.
was at that point, he was still WWF champion,
Okay.
okay? This is before the Nitro days,
Okay, so it's like
okay?
late '80s.
Yes, it was Saturday, it was we had Saturday night, the wrestling 2-hour wrestling show that was on TBS.
Yep.
We also had a show, Power Pro Wrestling. I think it came on some station on a Sunday
Yeah,
or
that was
something
Sunday
like
morning for
that.
me. That's right. That's
Sunday
what I was
morning,
watching.
okay.
Yep.
But, yeah, I mean, that's how it happened.
How long did you stay in WCW?
3.5 years total with them. I worked
Okay.
some in Florida, again for Dusty, and then for a guy we called Hump. He was Bam Bam Bigelow's manager at one time. He kinda looked like a leprechaun. He had the red hair, and he would dress like one. They would call him Sir Oliver Humperdinck, so everybody just called him Hump. So I would go down and do TV shots for Hump. I probably did 1 year NWA. I did shots for the AWA. I did shots in Florida on 2 different occasions, gone went down and stayed a while, and then worked WCW,
Okay.
and I had my longest stint. When I left the business, I left WCW.
What made you decide to leave wrestling?
For me, what had happened was I made the fatal mistake. I'd been married to a young lady for about 3 years, and I started believing that that instead of being Mark Smith, the guy that wrestles, I assumed the big-headed I took on the big-headed attitude that a wrestler needs, to go over with the crowd. I became the wrestler Mark Smith. So though I never hit her, ab verbally abusive, yes. Did I act like I cared? Not a lot. I mean, when I wrote the book Wrestling with Demons, I've had people ask me, "All right, who's the bad guy in this, Mark? Is it your dad? Is it your stepdad? Who's the bad guy in this book?" And I'm gonna tell you, Tim, it's me. I was the horse's you know what. I'm the person that in wrestling, I alienated myself from my family, from everybody. Wrestling was the only thing. And the thing is, I was pretty darn good at it. And the sad thing is I believed it.
Did it ever bother you seeing, like, people like Ric Flair succeed more, Ricky Steamboat, they're all succeeding? Did it ever bother you at all that that wasn't gonna be
No,
your
no,
career?
no,
No?
no, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. See, I used to call the old name for us was jobber. Now, some people today, they hate that word.
Yeah.
They can now call us we were carpenters. We helped build other careers.
Yep.
We were enhancement talent.
So, what did you do after wrestling?
2 or 3 things happened. Number 1, my wife left me.
Yep.
I cleaned up the apartment after she left, and I found a stick with pink on the end of it. Took that to a family member. They said, "This is a pregnancy test. It's positive." You know, I called probably at least 6 months trying to get in touch with my ex-wife. I didn't know what was going on, and I still loved her, but I had no right to ask her to stay. Her aunt picked up the phone one day and said, "It's been taken care of, Mark." Now, let me explain this. Number 1, if anything happened, I made it happen. I drove her to that point. I I accept full responsibility. I don't know if anything happened because I was never able to have a conversation, but I'm sure I'm not gonna slander her because I'm the one that made that hell on earth. That happened within a couple, 3 months. I get called to the sheriff's office. Sheriff is there and he says, "Mark, these individuals were the Georgia Bureau of Investigation." I go, "Okay. Yes, sir." Gentlemen, can you leave us alone?" So they walked in another room. He pulls out a stack of tapes, old cassette tapes. He said, "Mark, you're on these tapes." I said, "Sir?" He said, "You were talking about steroids and they listed the other person I was talking to." I said, "Yes, sir." "And you mentioned names." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "They are going to use because you mentioned someone else's name, no matter how it was intended, because you used someone else's name, they're going to cite you for distribution. It's going to be 20 years." He said, "You write down and tell me everything you know." I said, "Sheriff, I don't know much. I'll tell you, but I don't know." He said, "Just sit down and write." Well, I sat down and wrote. I was not throwing people I didn't know much, so I was not throwing people under the bus. But I knew when I started writing, my days in the business were gone. So I wrote it. He took it, looked at it. He just sat down and looked at it for about 5 minutes. Said, "Okay." It wasn't much there. I said, "Mr. Richard," that's the sheriff. I said, "Mr. Richard, I guess I'll see you in 20." He said, "Gentlemen, can you come in here?" He said, "I've known this boy, and I know he's telling the truth. Y'all can look at this." He handed it to him. There is nothing on that piece of paper. And frankly, I know he's telling the truth. It would not benefit society one iota for him to go to a prison. They looked at it and, "Yeah, you're right, Sheriff." So he got a manila folder, all the papers, he put them in there. He put a rubber band or back around tapes, put them in the manila folder, so it was pumping up with the tapes.
Yep.
He said, "Now, Mark, you better not ever get to that fork in that road again, because if you take one step in the wrong direction, all these charges will be reinstated." And people have asked me on several shows, they asked, "Well, did you feel great walking out? Did you really see that God was protecting you?" And I'm telling them, no. I, I, I lost my life, I felt like in baseball. Now I've lost it again. I'm back to that poor, lost little boy. I walked out probably with more questions than what I walked in with. But I'd lost so much, I understood I was in a hole, and then I had to start coming to terms, and I started screaming at him, and it was, "Why are you doing this to me?" That's how I was cut from the business, and now I'm happy I'm back in it. It's a miracle,
Yeah.
but that now I tell you, let me ask you, how powerful was that, Tim?
I wanna know what happened after you screamed at him, after you screamed at God.
Are you ready?
Like, did your life change?
Okay, this is what happened. I'll tell you every bit of it. I'm glad you're asking
Yep.
hard questions. I told you I'd be an open book, didn't I?
That's right.
All right. Tim, I walk into a hardware store a few weeks after that. Some old geezer, man, pokes me real hard in the shoulder. Pop, pop, pop. I look back. I'm thinking, who the crap are you? Son, I have a word for you. You do not have to go to school the rest of your life to be a preacher. I'm thinking, I got a word for you too. Maybe a few of them you ever poke me like that again, fella. What drugs are you on? I mean, that's what what drugs are you on? My gosh.
This guy didn't know you, did he?
No,
This
no. All these things
okay.
that are going to happen are people that didn't know me.
Wow.
A week later or so, a woman. I didn't know. All I felt was a pop, pop, pop. Three. Always three.
Hmm.
Yes, ma'am. Son, I have a word for you. I'm thinking, oh God, not a. You don't have to go to school the rest of your life to be a preacher. Thank you, ma'am. Uh-huh. Now I'm thinking, man, there's got to be some massive drugs on the street because of what these two people have just done. I want some of them. Okay. I really want them. What is it? You know? So now, a couple weeks later, pop, pop, pop. Then I have a word for you. You don't have to go to school all your life to be a preacher. What these people didn't know, because they didn't know me, what they didn't know was because my mama really kind of forced m she did, she forced me to do it. I went to
Yeah.
school, went to college 1 year immediately after high school. I entered the school with a 1.11 GPA for that year. Now, at the end of the school year, you know how when you get letters from the college and they may be, "We regret to inform you," things like that or whatever, or, "We're excited to welcome you to our university." I got a letter from the dean, and it basically said, "Mark, just go, get out, please, leave." And I jokingly, I tell people, yeah, that they wanted me to leave so bad that I got a $10 gasoline scholarship just to get off campus. So see, when these people are telling me I don't have to go to school, they have no idea that I have swore up and down I'm never stepping on a campus again in my life.
Yeah.
That happened like 8 times. Then I meet my wife, Brenda, and we go to church together and we go out on some dates. And she just up one day says, "You know what? I gotta I something really hit me hard." I go, "What is it?" "We're just dating." She said, "It's like I got a message and it was, Brenda, it you should marry a minister, and that's gonna be you." I start visiting everybody, making an amends.
Yeah.
No kidding, for the next 2 months, I apologized to over 200 people, face to face. There was one final amends I needed to do. I needed to go see that dean and apologize. That's how much in my heart I wanted to get things right with everybody. So, this is what happened. I go in, I ask for the dean, they let me right in. They She says, "Well, son, why are you here?" And I explained to her I was here, the 1.11 GPA deal. I said, "My life has changed. I've accepted Jesus. This is my faith is just changing. Wow. And I knew I needed to come by here and tell you I'm sorry." She said, "You really just came down here to say you're sorry?" I go, "Yes, ma'am." She started crying. She said, "Mark, there's one thing I want you to do for me." I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Go to the bookstore, get books, and start class tomorrow." She thought she was doing me a favor. I was fritzing out on the inside. I still did not want to go to school. Now, from what those people told me, and now she's telling me I'm going to school.
Yeah.
And inside I'm going, "Ah, no." I'm fritzing out. I mean, I'm just having a meltdown on the inside. Meanwhile, I'm going, "But ma'am, thank you so much." And on the inside, "Ah." You talk about a really split personality. That was a
Yeah.
moment I had a really split personality. God had my attention because Brenda and I are dating a while. We're in the middle of a service, actually, a camp meeting. And I say a little prayer. I go, "Hey, am I gonna be single the rest of my life, or am I supposed to get married? I mean, will you kinda fill me in a little bit so I understand kinda, like, how to handle things? Give me a sign or something? You know, what's gonna happen?" The service ends. Before I can turn, tap, tap, tap. Lady behind me, "Son, I have a word for you." Now, I look at this woman, and her hair is actually purple. She is so old. She probably dated Abe Lincoln at one point in her life. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
She was so old when she was speaking, sawdust was coming out. That's how old she was. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, she says, "I don't know what you have prayed for, but the answer is right beside you." I look to my left, and there's this really old guy. I look over here. There's Brenda. I'm looking up and going, "Oh God, please let it be Brenda." You know? So we've been married going on 33 years.
And if people don't know what the symbol of the 3 taps is, that's the Trinity, the Holy Trinity.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
3 taps.
Every time, 3 taps.
Mhm.
The Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost.
Almost almost the same rhythm. And so we were married, we have 3 children. The smallest one is about 2 years old. I get a call. We're living in Texas. I'm in Dallas. I've already left coming home. We lived about 2 hours away. Brenda calls me. I go, "What's up?" She said, "Mark, come back to Dallas quick." I go, "What?" "Come to Dallas. I'm in an ambulance." Austin started turning blue with bruises. Nobody knows what's going on. They did take his blood. Mark, he has no platelets in his blood. They're trying to stop the internal bleeding. Did anything happen? No, it just started happening. So I get back to Dallas. Over the next 5 months, they tell us we have to have him padded up, everything. If he was to have skinned his knee, he would die out. He would die, bleed out before we could get him to the hospital. It's the most helpless feeling to see your baby like that, and there's absolutely nothing you can do. He would still have blotches over those months. He must have had 20 blood tests. Always came back 0 platelets, 0 platelets, 0 platelets. Finally, the doctors in Dallas call us one day, and they say we need to talk to you. They said something happened in the middle of the night. Well, Mr. Smith, the only way we can describe it is to say it's a miracle. 300 over 300,000 platelets appeared in his blood this morning. We've never seen it. We don't know how to explain it. It is a miracle. Your son is healed. They use the words, your son is healed. So not only was I put through this unbelievable transformation with all the taps and things and everything coordinating just right, my son was instantly healed.
And Mark, you experienced a ton of life storms. What advice do you have for parents with kids who just keep getting knocked down?
I don't remember where I heard it from. It's very simple. God does not make junk. No matter where you think you are in life, God did not make you junk. You're not junk. You may not have found that right door yet, but I look at life now like a wrestling match. When I'm down and when I get into those deep places, and man, I'm wondering how am I going to overcome it? What's the deal? I have to make sure that in my heart I make the tag, God, come on in and take over the match. Come on in and win it for me. Tim, it's amazing the number of self-help books out there. Do you know what? It hit me the other day, literally. Do you know why there are tens of thousands of self-help books?
I
Because
don't.
nobody's found the answer. Because they keep trying to look at
Good
the
point.
person themselves.
Yep.
I found a book that works. The most, the most printed and the most critiqued book in the world. I found it, and by that, I found my foundation. And when I found my foundation and found out that I really did matter, I'm gonna tell you what, Tim. It is freedom to know that I was meant for something. And if you're down, if you're listening to this and you're beaten down and you're going, God, what do I do? God is exactly what to do.
Mark, if people want to get a hold of you or follow you, how can they do that?
Sure. Uh, my Facebook is Ira Mark Smith. If you want to hit me up with a friend request, I'm gonna tell you what, I'm gonna check you out. There's some weirdos out there,
Yeah.
okay? So I'll check you out. But, you know, I do accept a lot of friends. Uh, Also, our website is www wrestling with demons smith wrestling with demons smith. That's two S's, demons smith, two S's
Yep.
.com. And our book has now gone also into Kindle. It's much more affordable because then you don't have to pay for the shipping and all that kind of stuff. Mark Smith, by Mark and Brenda Smith, Wrestling with Demons. And I am currently writing Wrestling with God because wrestling with God is a beautiful thing. Again, thank you for your time. Tim is an awesome guy. And when he brings things like this, and I know he's brought you other people, this right here shows it's a labor of love. Please drop him a line. Let him know how he's blessing you because he needs encouragement as well. He's the real deal, and he has been so courteous. Tim, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I love all of you. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Mark. And for myself, you can always find us at our very own website, which is www.breakingbullying.com. You can also reach out to us at our email address. If you have a story of your own bullying to share, or for whatever reason you want to get a hold of us, our email address is breakbullyinghere@gmail.com. Now, if you're a victim of bullying and you don't know where to turn, there is online resources to help you. The first is the government's very own anti-bullying website, and the address is www.stopbullying.gov. And other online resource is www.pacer.org/bullying. Now, if you have had thoughts of suicide or of self-harm, we implore you to stop. Reach out to the National Suicide Hotline. That number is very simple. It's 988. I'm Tim Flynn, and thank you for listening, and we will be back next week to continue the conversation to break the silence on bullying.